Hello and welcome to today's episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my very great privilege to be joined by the fabulous James Brackin IV. James, welcome.
It is so great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this. We've been chatting behind the scenes for a while, but before we get stuck in, as I know we really can, let me tell the audience a little bit more about you. So James is also a podcast host. He's the host of the fabulous You Can Too, a podcast sharing inspiring stories from some of the most exceptional thought leaders on the planet, including Hollywood medium Tyler Henry, Seth Godin, and Gary Brecker. He's also a personal coach helping entrepreneurs get out of their way and helps thought leaders impact more people. I love that, James, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? Is how do we stop holding ourselves back? And how do we become our own cheerleader when we're very often very good at being cheerleaders for other people? So can you tell us more about your journey so far and what's got you here?
Yeah, absolutely. Great introduction. There's so many pathways I can go down from that. I think the one that I often start with on most podcasts I go on is I lost a lot of family really young in an unexpected way. My father and uncle both passed at 37. My grandfather passed a few months before his retirement. And so in an unexpected way, it really helped me realize how intentional I wanted to live life and not put things off until a later date because shoot, I don't even know if the later date's going to come. And we
Yeah.
know that. And it's hard for us to really conceive because we can't imagine what life is like after death. I think a lot of us live like we're not going to die, even though we know we're going to die, but we can't conceptualize it. So we don't live like it. And so that was the intention. And so I hired a coach when I was really young at 17, invested more money than I had in my bank account just to go down a path I knew that was going to lead me to where I wanted to go. And it led me down so many different pathways from coaching to podcasting to working with thought leaders, like you say, did, and so many different things. But that's the core of why I kind of moved down this path.
I love that. I think sometimes life gives us something that ensures that we understand the need to be intentional. Because very often we're not, are we? We're kind of putting it off. So, well, I'll do that when. And we've got life backwards. You know, we're all saving for a retirement that we're not promised we're going to have, instead of living in the here and now and living with that intention. And I think for me, that's the bit I'm hearing quite a lot recently, and from various people, seems to be the new word is actually whatever we're doing it intentionally. We're doing it with purpose, with forethought. And that takes effort, doesn't it? It takes effort to move from a life of living the way society has always done to actually now taking back control of the pen and being the author of your own life. So how would you recommend people get started if that sounds interesting to them?
Yeah, it's a great frame that you use. I think for me, what was powerful was investing in myself. So I think, like you said, it's really easy to be a cheerleader for other people, but it's really difficult to be a cheerleader for ourselves. I think the same thing goes with the problems that we face. It's really difficult to overcome the problems when we're so close to them. I think that's why an external perspective, whether that's a coach, a mentor, accountability buddy, just a friend, whoever it may be, someone that can see something in you that you can't see in yourself is the kind of way that I like to see it. I mean, we've all had it, whether it was a coach that we had growing up, or maybe it was one of our parents. We've always had someone that could see something in us we can't see in ourselves. And I think it's really powerful because on those days where we don't feel like showing up, where we want to revert back to the person that we used to be, instead of going forward and creating a life that we really, truly love, I think it's really powerful to have someone outside of you to help you see a different perspective of your own problems. Because when you're so close to them, it's really hard to overcome them. But if we were telling someone else the advice that we need to give to ourselves, it'd be really easy because it's not on us. And so I think for me, what was really powerful was investing into myself, because for a lot of people that they thought that's when the work ends. You know, you spend a lot of money and you buy a course, you get into a coaching program, whatever it is, that's when the work ends because, well, I just made the investment. For me, it was this realization of that's when the work started. That's when things really started to happen because I invested more money than I had in my bank account. Like I genuinely needed to find a way to make more money so that I could even pay that off just to begin with. And so putting my back against the wall, taking on more than I can handle was something that really, for more than anything, really changed my life because it made me see a different version of myself and show up as a different version of myself because I had to. I gave myself up no other option. Now, for some people, that's not the best route that they can take, but that for me, that's what worked.
I love that. I think sometimes for some people, as you say, it has to be when the platform's already burning that you've kind of got to make that leap. And I know, you know, I'm a single mum to a 7-year-old, and that's been a game changer because I look at things now and go, but if I don't do this, then I'm letting her down, or I'm showing her that actually it's okay to not keep going. It's okay to stop developing. And you put it so eloquently. The work doesn't end once you've got the course. It's the start, and the start of what becomes, I think, almost a lifelong journey into learning, doesn't it? My nan used to say, every day is a school day. So in every day we should learn something. And my granddad used to say, live each day as if it's your last, and one day you'll be right. And I think between the two of them, they pretty much nailed life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to keep learning, and you can't put off until tomorrow. And I don't know if you found it. I sometimes find it when I'm coaching clients. You say something and you're like, that's really good advice. We're not taking it. That little voice in my head that just reminds me sometimes that actually I have to take my own medicine. If I'm telling other people that I'm coaching they should do it, you have to have that reflection. So why is it that you do what you do?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I think like of all of the authors that I've had on my show and people that I've spoken to, most authors are writing the book that they need to hear most. It's the problem that they've dove into the most in their life. And so they have the most authority to talk about it, but it doesn't mean that they've overcome it completely. So that's something it's so true. Why I do what I do is on top of losing a lot of family, it really put me down a path of depression, anxiety, and just a place where, I didn't really want to wake up, to be completely honest with you, early on in my life. And going down that path to where I'm at now, like you said, I mean, school started for me after high school, funny enough, because I started reading books and understanding things that I never could possibly imagine. The story that I tell myself, the way that I can show up for myself, the psychology, neuroscience, like so many things that just really changed the direction of my life. And I think for so many people, we need the information to start, but then we need the accountability and we need reminders to keep going. I think a coach I had on my podcast a while ago brought up the fact that coaching is permission and reminders. And I think for a lot of people, I think that's the best way that I've ever heard it framed, because first off, as a coach, humans, we need permission. We could give it to ourselves realistically, but it's so difficult for us to tell ourselves, yeah, like you have the permission to take this sleep. You have the permission to do this thing, because we're just always going to get in our own way. It goes back to that. Then we need reminders, because the one thing that every single human does is we forget. We forget of our infinite capability. We forget about how, like, there's days where we feel amazing, and then there's days where we feel the worst. Like, life is not a constant. It's either going really high or really low. And on those days where you're feeling really low, you need a reminder. And sometimes it's just a little bit of a reminder to help you kind of see, again, something that you can't see in yourself that someone else can see in you. And so through coaching, I realized really early on how empowering that really is for me. And so if I could do that for other people, man, it's amazing. And like you said earlier, is a lot of the time we need to hear it for ourselves, the advice we're giving to someone else. But funny enough, most of the time I'm on a coaching call, I'm not giving any advice, but I'm just giving what's downloaded to me in the moment. It's just same with the podcast. It's like, I don't even want to know anything that's going to go on with the podcast, because whatever is going to come through, it's going to come through me, and that's going to happen through the podcast. So that's a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love that, because I think that is so true. And I think, for me, sometimes, you're so intently listening. And what I find is that people inadvertently are telling you their own answer.
Yeah.
They just can't hear it yet. Because we have blind spots for a reason, don't we? We're blind to them. So, even if they're glaringly obvious to everybody else, if we can't see them, we can't see them. And that's when somebody needs to help us and kind of like shine a light on those, help us see what they can see. Because again, I think we often get confused with the fact that we live in a world of polarity. So for every up, there's a down, for every left, there's a right. So just because I'm right doesn't make you wrong, and just because you're right doesn't make me wrong. We're just viewing things from a slightly different perspective. And once we're open to the conversation and to being curious about, what can you see that I can't see, and what can I see that you can't see, and what can we collectively do together, that's when you really start to see barriers breaking down for people, don't you? But start to see them go, actually, yeah, no, I could do that. And I love your piece around the permission piece, because I've often found when I was leading teams, the biggest breakthrough was when you gave people permission to be part of the solution. So instead of boxing them in and telling them what they've got to do, actually opening it up and going, you're as required as I am to solve this, and your thoughts and your suggestions are equally valid as mine. So let's talk about them. Let's explore them. Let's be curious about them. and see what gets channeled through us. I love that that's what you're saying with the podcast as well. It's just being really open to that conversation and being really present so that you can genuinely really listen,
Mhm.
and see what flows through that. Is that what inspires you to hear, like to be able to help people to hear their own hidden truth?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I got into coaching, I think a lot of people think it's I'm just giving advice. And as a 17-year-old, what advice do I have to give? I've barely lived any life, right? One of my first coaches told me was that two things that really, really resonate with me deeply to this day. One, that you do a disservice by not bringing your unique gifts into the world. And so I don't have all the advice in the world. If I did, I'd be in like everything would be perfect in my life. But what I do have is an ability to create a space for people to be vulnerable and open. I
Mm,
found that a lot, and it's something that I just hope I can provide for everyone that I meet, whoever it is, whether it's a client or someone I just meet as I'm walking. The other part was that you don't need to have the answers, you just need to have the questions, right?
mm,
And so, like you said, every single one of us have our own answers. A coach is not saying that you're further along in life or you have more experience or none of that. It's just a mirror. It's helping you see something because you have your own answers. And I tell that with clients, and so they'd say, "Well, why am I working with you?" Well, it's because if you could generate those answers yourself, well, you would have done it already. You already would be where you'd like to be. But
yeah,
having someone outside of you to help you, ask those insightful questions that, you're afraid of asking. And I think a lot of the time it's what role am I playing that I don't want to admit? When you have a coach, they can help you see that. And
yeah.
so it's so powerful for me that I realized that, I mean, I would be doing a disservice if I wasn't bringing that into the world, no matter the fear or insecurity or imposter syndrome that was coming up. Am I going to let that stop me from helping people? No.
I love that because it is having to get over yourself, isn't it? To go, actually, I just want to help. And
Mhm.
yeah, I remember many years ago somebody saying to me, "Oh, you're a coach, so you think you're better than me?" And I was like, "No,
Yeah.
absolutely not." I said, "But every top athlete, every top politician, every top actor, actress, every top business person has got a coach. And you know what? If they were actually better, if the coach were better than the person they were coaching, it'd be their name we know.
Right.
And that's not the point. So the point is they can stand behind you and say, yeah, you run ever so slightly to the left. And if you could just straighten that, you'd probably improve your time. And they're like, oh, I'd not thought of that. I said, yeah, that's all they're here to do is help you, to your point, hold that mirror up, be able to go, actually, here's the bit you can't see.
Mhm.
Or, and I loved you put it so eloquently, that almost the what are the questions I don't want to ask myself? Because you can stop asking yourself those ones. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll put that on my little pending pile. But if you've got a coach or an accountability buddy or a good friend that you trust, they're not going to let you put it on the pending pile, are they? They're going to hold it up and go, like you've kicked that can down the road a couple too many times. You now need to pick it up and look at it. Is that what you've found?
Absolutely. It's funny. It brings up a lot of the time when I first started coaching with people, there was a client that every now and again he'd hop on the call and I'd ask him if he took action on his action steps from last week. And he would try to lie. And as soon as he was lying of giving an excuse of why he didn't do it or whatever it was, he'd catch himself and he started laughing because he can't lie. Like you're lying to yourself at that point. And so you're right. It's just having someone that's there for you that wants you to be your best self at the end of the day. And
Yeah,
doesn't want you to keep dealing with the same problems over and over and over again because as humans, we like the security of doing something, even if it isn't in our best interest. And having someone outside of you that is for your best interest. I mean, it's the only shortcut in life. I really believe that.
yeah. I agree, and I think also, as you've said, coaches don't always have all of the answers, but they do have all of the questions. But I think equally, we've each of us, whether we're a coach or we're not a coach, we've all got our lived experience,
Yeah.
and actually, that's really powerful for anybody that might now be facing something we've already lived through.
Mhm.
Because although it'll be different, although it'll be unique, because it will be their experience, not yours, knowing that people have got through it, knowing that people have come through the other side can be really helpful, can't it, in those moments when it all just feels overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny too because I think experience comes from experiments in a way, and
Yeah,
to some respect. Like there are people. I think everyone's experienced this when you're like, I can think of an example of I was on a plane a few months ago and I'm sitting next to an older man that was trying to give me all the advice in the world. And it was just terrible advice. And he's probably in his 70s and his 80s and just giving me like the worst possible advice ever. And it brings me back to like, I think wisdom doesn't come from age, but it comes from experience. And a lot of experience comes from experimentation, just putting yourself in positions to see what you're capable of, to see what life is really all about. And there are so many people that the longer you live doesn't mean that you have more experience, because you could be creating the same experience over and over and over again. I mean, there's people in my family that are much older than I am, and I'm teaching them things that they had no possible idea of. And that's just because I experimented and I put myself in positions and learned from people that are ahead of me in other situations.
I love that, because it's looking at those people that are a bit further ahead, isn't it? And going, well, I wonder how they got there. I wonder what I might be able to do. Um, and then feeling the fear and doing it anyway. I remember many years ago having to do an exercise where you went and asked people that you trusted, like colleagues, friends, etc. What are the one or two things that you see as my strengths, and what are the one or two things where you see I get in my own way?
Mhm.
And it came back almost unanimously with brave and fearless. And I was like, yeah, I don't get that. I live in fear literally every day. I live in fear of getting found out, fear of somebody finding out that I'm only a hairdresser really and I shouldn't have this board level role, or whatever was the story I had going on in my head. And I was like, okay, you're going to have to give me more information on that because I don't understand it. And they were like, you will literally up sticks and move to a place where you know nobody for a job you're not convinced you can do. And I went, mm-hmm. And they said, well, that's brave and fearless. I went, interesting. I thought you all thought I was flighty and a little bit stupid. so although I did push myself to go and experiment, can I actually do this? Can I go and live on my own somewhere where I know nobody, whilst trying to do a new job or learn a new skill? And actually, yeah, you can. Sometimes you fall, but you can get up from that, can't you? You can get up from that fall and go, life. I've found life only really makes sense in the rearview mirror. Like when you look back and you can put the jigsaw pieces together, you're like, that's why that and that happened. Whereas when I'm in it, I'm not always that certain. And so one of the things I look for is just the next jigsaw puzzle. It's like I can't see the picture, so I'm just going to see the next thing that fits. So for me, sometimes that's what success looks like for the day. It's like I found the next part of the puzzle and I fit it together. So I might still not know the picture, but I've moved that a little bit further forward. What does success look like for you?
Success for me has really changed over the years, and it continues to change, and I hope it does. It's for the most part, it's my standards, is what I've said for a long time. It's like, am I doing what I said I would do at the end of the day? There's a quote by Tom Bilyeu that has stuck with me for a few years, and it's probably my favorite quote ever. And it's, all that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. A lot
Mhm.
of us are looking for external things, achievements, places we want to get to, things we want to do to fill a void within ourselves. And I think if we just did what we said we do, we had a strong relationship with ourselves. Like, discipline isn't, pushing yourself from a place of hatred, but it's doing things that you know are going to be in your benefit in the future. Um, and so that's, for me, that's what it looks like. If am I happy with myself? Am I doing what I said I would do? Am I showing up for myself? That's success, because that's all I really can be in control of, is what I'm doing, not so much what I'm getting from what I'm doing.
I love that. It's so true, isn't it? We can only control that viewpoint. It's like, am I doing the things in my control, and am I holding myself to account for doing the things that I've committed to? And I know for me personally, one of the things that I was really bad at, and I'm getting much better at, was, and I'd love your thoughts on this, was I would do that, but then if somebody else needed me, if somebody else had a problem and they wanted your help, I would stop what I'd promised to myself and I'd
Mm,
deliver that, because I think, well, no, I should do that and I can get round to mine. And then all of a sudden never got round to mine because you were so busy. And taking that step back to say, I am equally as important as everybody else. I'm no more important, but I'm also no less important. And therefore, I should prioritize not only helping others, but doing the things I've committed to doing as well. I had to be really intentional about making that change. Is that something that you've observed people doing?
yeah, I mean, I think it's like the oxygen mask idea of when you're on a plane, right? Like, you have to show up for yourself first. The amount of coaches I know that don't have a coach themselves blows me away. It's it doesn't make any sense. Like for me, and it's going to be in some capacity, whether it's my health or um, my business or my personal spiritual health. Like there's so many things that you can move forward in your life. For me, boundaries have always been something that I've been really good at, because if I don't show up for myself, how can I show up for anyone else at the end of the day?
Yeah,
But I think a lot of people do struggle with taking on the burden of what other people have going on, when at the end of the day, it's their responsibility. And you can give all the advice, you can help them in every direction, but you cannot help people that don't want to be helped. I've really, really, and it's one of the most difficult things to accept, because when you are improving your life in so many ways, all you want to do is help other people and take them along the ride. But people can bring you down if they don't want to be helped, or if they don't want your help.
yeah. That so resonates. Or when you suddenly think, well, hold on, I'm doing all the work and you're not doing any of it, so you've not really evolved or changed. It reminds me of there's a book by Marshall Goldsmith called Becoming Coachable. That
Yep.
piece says actually you've got to be ready to be coached. You've got to be ready to make the change, because change is uncomfortable. Doesn't mean to say we can't do it, but it's uncomfortable, and therefore you've got to be willing to go through the uncomfortable to be able to come to the other side, haven't you? And I love that you used the analogy of the oxygen mask, because I never used to get that. I'd be
Mm,
like, surely you don't do that. You know, if I've got a little one, then surely I'd put it on her first, until I realized, hold on, if I put it on her and can't get mine on, what happens to her? If
yeah.
I can get mine on, then I'm going to have been much more used to her to be able to help. But I'm ashamed to say that it took me until in my 40s, when I had a child, that I realized, that dawning realization. It was like, oh, she'd be no use with just the oxygen mask on, and she'd be really scared. Whereas you've got to do that the other way. But it was a real eye opener for me to then look at how many times am I trying to pour from an empty cup, because you're trying to do everything for everybody else, but you're not coming back and holding yourself to account. And you're allowing yourself to get away with murder, because you can go, oh, I didn't do any of those things because I was being Mother Teresa over here to all these other people. But actually, you're like, yeah, but your accountability is to you. And like you said at the start, sometimes you've got to put your back against the wall to force yourself to go, there is nowhere else to
Mhm.
go. Doing nothing is not an option. So I've got to find a way through. I've got to push through. And I think also, you know, as you say, always having a coach, because we can't see our own blind spots. Doesn't matter if you're the best coach in the world, you won't be able to see your own blind spot, because you're blind to them. And that's kind of what you're needing, is it? Is somebody who can help you probe into those, like, why are you blind to them? What's really sitting underneath that? And then what options might you have? Because I think for me, that's the bit I love about both my coach and both when I'm coaching, is it becomes much more about a team effort. You're no
Mhm.
longer in it on your own. I mean, you've got to do the work, but actually you've now got other people whose sole purpose is to help you achieve that goal. And so it's like being, when I led big teams, it's like being in a team. You know, you've got collective support to help you get there. Do you find the same with the people you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been people that I've worked with that I can show up for them, but if they don't show up for them, then it's not going to work at the end of the day,
Yeah,
right? Like I can do all the I can't do all the work, right? Like that's just how it works. And so that's why I work one on one with people, and I'm very selective with who I work with, because I know that it's going to be more of a hassle to work with the people that don't really want to put in the work, and you can usually tell those
yeah,
kind of people. But yeah, if they're not showing up for themselves, it's the same thing with like wanting to help people that maybe are in your family or your close friends. Like you just genuinely cannot help them if they don't want to put in the work to actually help themselves at the end of the day. It's really difficult, because a lot of people need to get to a point where it's so bad that they're forced to make a positive change. And for me, and I bet the same thing for you, it's like we want to help people before they get there. But it's so difficult for people to get out of what they know, even if they know that what they know isn't exactly what they want.
that's so true. Because I think sometimes, and we have all these sayings. I don't know if if you had the same over, but you know, over here we've got sayings like, "It's better the devil you know." Grass isn't always greener. So
Mhm.
all these things that were to anchor us to, no matter how bad the situation is, it could get worse.
Yeah.
So you best just not move, because you just got to stay where you are. And I think we had them peppered throughout our childhood, and you're like, but they're not true. They're not true. It might be better on the other side. We can change things. We don't have to go, well, this is awful, but at least I know what it is. We can go, well, this is awful. What bits of it can I change? What steps can I see that I could start to make some evolution? And I know it's not just the coaching, but I'd love to also get onto your podcast as well, because I think podcasting is a great way of also sharing people's lived experience, helping people to access other people's stories, to be able to take up from those whatever they want or whatever they think is going to speak to them right now. So tell me more about your podcast and what made you get started.
Yeah, it's funny. My coaching journey started through the podcast in a way, because I joined a coaching program, and it was by one of the biggest podcasters in the world. And so I thought, well, I don't really know what a coach is, but I know that I want to create a podcast. So let me move down this path. I think it was an affirmation I almost told myself of "you can too" growing up, because I mean, everyone's plagued with self-doubt in some way, shape, or form, in some level. And for me, it was something that really held me back. And so I really thought, I want to learn from people that are ahead of me in some shape or form, whether it's talking about anxiety, or it's talking about business, or it's talking about career development. Like, there's so many things that we can learn. And so my approach was, well, I want to learn from the people that had to overcome a lot of things. And I didn't want to go to college for it, but I still want to learn about neuroscience. I still want to learn about psychology. Let me just go to the direct person that's speaking about it, instead of going to all the classes that I would have to go to learn about it. And I learned a much faster route. And that was the approach. Was I just want to learn from people and help people through sharing stories, to help them believe that, you need to unlearn a lot of things to be able to step forward. It's not so much about learning things, but more so, what do these people have to unlearn? What are they unlearning? And then how can my audience also unlearn that as well? And it's kind of like humanizing world changing individuals. Like, we put a lot of people on pedestals, but if I can bring it down to, like, what are you still going through? I think it gives a lot of other people a lot of hope for themselves as well.
I love that. And it's so true, isn't it? But very often it's what we've got to unlearn, not what we've got to still learn.
Yeah.
And like you, I've got a real fascination with neuroscience and all of those parts, but I came to it later in life and couldn't find the time to go and study. So I was like, well, let me go and learn from people. Let me go and see, how did you get
So
to
cool.
understand that? What happened in your life to be able to to give you that insight? And I guess that's the society we live in now, isn't it? It's like you could go and read the books and spend the next 30 years doing it, or you could have a half-hour conversation with the person who wrote the book, and they can give you the key takeaways. Like, by all means, read the whole book, but actually the three things you need to take away from this that are actionable, that you can do something with, are this, and this. Like, brilliant. Now I can actually affect some change.
Well, for me, what I thought was fascinating was I found I took a lot of pride in never reading a book throughout my entire life up until I was about 16, after I got out of high school, 17. And I never read any books. My mom and sister always told me, you're going to start reading, you'll eventually read. And I was like, no, I hate reading. It sucks. All the books that they gave me they just never give me anything in life. Started reading books after I got out of high school that actually improved my life. And I thought, let me read this book, but I still have some questions. I still have some questions based on this, and this, and it doesn't really makes much sense to me. So let me go talk to the author. To this day, it's still, and I assume probably the same thing for you and a lot of podcasters, it's the coolest thing in the world when I can read a book that Seth Godin, 21 international best-selling author, wrote, and then I can go speak to him. Like, that was just, that's like instead of meeting celebrities, like, that is my celebrity. That is the person.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people that I'm genuinely so fascinated by, because they took years out of their life to dedicate so much to this specific problem that multiple people never overcome throughout their entire life. And so I thought it's fascinating, still think it's fascinating. I think it's the coolest thing ever.
I love that. And I think it just shows that when you put yourself out there, it's amazing, because the amount of people that will go, well, I couldn't possibly ask them.
Yeah.
I say, oh my God, it's their life work. It's their life work. So if you're interested enough to ask them questions about their purpose, their reason for giving their life over to it, they're not going to go, no, sorry, I'm busy. Because they're like, yes, I want somebody to be involved in the debate. Actually, it demonstrates, doesn't it, their legacy is doing what they expected their legacy to do, and to continue that debate. So I love that actually you're taking that. And I think very often when we're growing up and we learn it in a particular way, and I see so many people that come and find their calling to get involved in something that's going to transform and develop them much later, because they didn't want to follow the path that wasn't their path.
Yeah.
It was, let's put everybody on the same path and let's just push you along. And yeah, I've seen so many people that have like left school and not done that, but come back to it and ended up being significantly more successful, because it's now being done through intentionality.
Mhm.
It's being done because they are in the driving seat. And I think once we find that driving seat for ourselves, things become so much clearer, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a lot of people are in a place where they don't know what they want, and it's so they're plagued with just paralysis by analysis of like there's so many things I can do. I have no idea what I want to do. I think a really good advice for people that are in that position is the best decision is the decision that you go all in on. It's not the one that is going to put you in X position or whatever it may be. Because when you are going thinking about 20 different things and you try a bunch of different things, you're not really seeing what you're capable of. But if you go all in on one thing, even if it's the worst decision ever, at least you made a decision and then you move forward, because not making any decisions at all still is a decision to begin with, but you're just deciding to stay in the same place, which is probably that is the worst decision. The best decision is just choosing one, going all in, deciding that, hey, I can actually change my mind about this. This doesn't have to be the rest of my life. And then going down that and then maybe changing your mind. You could even change your mind a few weeks later and then just decide to do something else. But just going all in on one thing, committing to it instead of just being interested in it, there's a big difference between the two. I think it would just give so many people just the emphasis of like, hey, I'm actually in control here. Like I can change my mind, because so many people think when I go down this path, like that's my path, because that's what college tells us, right? Is like
Yeah.
when we go to college, I'm going for this thing. But the amount of people that change their major, like goodness gracious, it's more people change their major than stick to the same major or even drop out. And so it's same thing in life.
I love that. It reminds me, I was chatting to somebody on the show a few weeks ago, Cindy Carrillo, and her book is about finding your next.
Yeah.
So not thinking about it being like, every decision is like, once I've done it, there's no going back. It's like, well, it's just the next decision. It's like, I've
Who
got
would have
to,
thought?
I've got to go in and I've got to go all in.
Yeah.
But interestingly, one of the things I've found over the years is people are very good at writing their goals in the negative. So
Mm,
they write about what they don't want. I don't want to get old. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to be in this job. I don't want to be. And when you're like, okay, what do you want? Yeah, I've
yeah.
not thought of that. Well, come on, let's work that out, because we need to be setting it about where we want to go. Because if not, we're going to end up where we don't want to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a lot of people, they don't have good role models around them. And so figuring out what you don't want is the only step that they can take. Right.
Yeah,
And it's funny to think of it through this lens, but I've seen a lot of people speak on it like this is, or not a lot of people speak on it like this is, if you don't know what you want, it's really good to get clear on what you don't want, because then you just do the opposite.
yeah, yeah,
Like for me, I grew up with a lot of people that just struggled with money and struggled with just not loving what they do for work. And so really young, I just got really intentional about my personal finance and figuring out what do I need to do to set myself up for success. And now when I speak to financial advisors and people like that, they're like, what is going on right now? You're so young. How do you have this? And it's like, well, I just knew that that's what I didn't want, was to struggle with money. And the same thing when it comes to work and helping people and, dealing with mental health problems that so many people deal with. Just if you don't know what you want, figure out what you don't want. But if you do know what you want, fully focus on that, because we get
yeah.
way too consumed on what we don't want and then we move towards it, which you just
I,
did.
I love that. And I think the point that for me that was really impactful about that is start with what you don't want and then do the opposite.
Yeah.
And I think for me that's the crucial part. And because if not, if you just are focused on being really clear on what you don't want, but you don't then look at, okay, so what's the opposite of that? So I don't want this, therefore what's the opposite of it? Because that's probably what I do want. You can stay stuck, can't you, in that paradigm of kind of, well, I don't want it, but it's still happening to me.
Yeah.
I think doing that step that you talked about, which was then doing the opposite. Well, I don't want that, so I don't want to struggle with finances. I do want to have good finances. I want to have what I need to continue. James, I could literally chat to you all day, but I'm very conscious of time. So before we get on to how people can get in touch with you and how can they work with you, and I appreciate you're already so young but have packed so much in. If you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Just trust yourself more, honestly. And everything that I've done, I mean, I've trusted myself to start it, but then just in anything we forget. Like I stated, I think a coach of mine actually told me that recently, and it is nothing has ever resonated more in the sense of we just forget. We always forget, and if we could just remember a little bit more and just trust ourselves a little bit more, I think a lot of us would be in a much better place in life because we when that intuition shows up, we just think, well, I don't know. I'm just gonna, I don't know. I don't know. We just question ourselves, and so just trust a little bit more.
I love that. It reminds me of a good friend of mine who introduced me to the Big Me Up book. So what she said was you have to have a little book that you can carry around everywhere. And every time you do something well, or every time somebody compliments you or on a skill or on something that you've done, you write it in the book. So for all those moments when self-doubt hits in, that's your reminder.
So
You
good.
flick through the book and you go, no, I've got this. I've got this. This is just that little devil on my shoulder that's trying to keep me where I am. So, James, how can people get in touch and work with you, and who do you help?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people I help, it's really cool because I thought my age was a limitation when I first started. Now I realize it's more of a superpower because I'm able to work with really anyone at any age. It's been really cool in so many different positions and jobs. So I work with really anyone. As broad as that may sound, it's really true. When it comes to connecting with me, James Brackin IV, pretty much on all socials. I'm on YouTube. You can too. Um, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can find it everywhere. I think on YouTube it's under James Brackin IV, but yeah, that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure all of the links to all of your things are in the show notes below. So for everybody listening and watching, if you want to be able to connect with James and learn more, just go to the notes below and all of that will be there for you. James, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing such insight with us here. It's been an absolute delight.
Thank you for having me. Such a great conversation. I'm grateful to impact the audience in some way.
Fantastic. And to everybody listening and watching, I hope you found it as inspiring and insightful as I have. And until next time, take care.